Another consideration is whether you want to provide any indication of progress updates or feedback to the user for this particular module. So you would have noticed that there's also a graphs option in the module properties. So this is where we can make decisions about what feedback we want to display to the user. So if we open up the editing graph screen, we'll see that the first option presented is whether or not we want to display a graph for this module. So if we turn that on, we get a whole range of graph settings, such as a title for the graph. Let's say, I think I had a slider in there. Let's say slider graph demo, and a blurb to present to give your user an understanding of what data you're actually presenting. In this case, this graph displays some dummy data from a slider. The next important step is to select which variable you would like to graph from this module. So click on the select and it will pop up with any relevant variables that are graphable. In this case, we only had a single slider in this module, so that's the only variable available to graph. So we'd select that one, and we want to select whether we want a bar or a line graph. In this case, let's just select a bar graph. And the final attribute we need to set here is the number of points to graph. So if your module is going to appear multiple times per day, let's say 7 times per day, and we want to, for 5 days let's say, and we want to display only the most recent 10 points, we have to set 10 in the maximum points to graph. And then the graph will display only the most recent 10 responses to this particular module, or this particular variable. You can make this as small or as large as you like, but keep in mind that having too many data points on a graph, it can become difficult to understand. So in this case, we had a variable to graph. If we were to go back and delete this slider element, and then go back to the graphing options, you'll see that you get this error message that there are no valid question types to graph in this module. So if you see this, this means that you haven't added a numeric data type. So the other types that can be graphed are the slider, as we've already seen, and the text input with a numeric subtype. So let's call this one text to graph as its ID, just to make it easier to track. And let's say this question can be graphed. If we go back into the graph options, you'll see, again, we have the option to display a graph because there's a valid question type to graph. And in the variable to graph, we'll see that new variable that I created becomes available to select. So that's how you set up a graph for feedback for a module.